And now we're going streaming live on YouTube. Jadi nanti kami akan memulai sebentar lagi. Baik, kita mulai. Bapak Ibu, terima kasih atas antusiasmenya. Selamat pagi, Adil Kak Talino, Bacuramin Kak Saruga, Basengat Juwata, Arus. Ini merupakan salam dari bahasa Beahi Dayak Kanayan yang berarti adil terhadap sesama manusia, berpedoman hidup pada surga dan selalu mengingat Tuhan sebagai pemberi kehidupan. So we're so happy, we're extremely over the moon to welcome each and every one of you at this webinar, Extensive Reading, Getting the Reading Habit and How to Assess It, held by English Language Education Study Program of Paman Talino College of Education, West Kalimantan. We are also honored and humbled that all distinguished speakers are also able to join us today to share their insight and thoughts on the topics. My name is Kunto Nur Cahyoko and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, sebelum kita memulai webinar pada pagi hari ini, izinkan saya untuk membacakan beberapa tata tertib sehingga acara dapat berjalan dengan lancar. Pertama, Bapak Ibu, peserta akan mengikuti webinar ini melalui Zoom dan live streaming YouTube. Nantinya, webinar ini akan direkam dan diunggah melalui kanal YouTube STKIP Pamane Talino dengan link yang akan diberikan kepada Bapak Ibu sekalian. Jadi ketika nanti ada yang telat gabung atau pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang mungkin belum dijawab, yang sebagainya kita bisa meneruskan secara offline. Yang kedua, pada saat webinar, kami mohon maaf karena akun Zoom dari semua peserta akan kami mute untuk berinteraksi seperti memberikan pertanyaan, masukan, dan lain-lain. Bapak Ibu dipersilahkan bertanya melalui grup WhatsApp, komentar di YouTube, atau melalui chat Zoom. Dan pertanyaan-pertanyaan tersebut akan moderator berikan kepada pembicara saat beliau-beliau setelah menyampaikan materi mereka. Nah, mengingat durasi yang terbatas, kami akan menyeleksi pertanyaan berdasarkan prinsip relevansi dan representasi. Nanti kami coba buka 2 termin, dan masing-masing termin 2-3 pertanyaan. Terus yang terakhir, e-certificate akan didapatkan oleh peserta setelah mengisi angket kepuasan webinar ini. Link angket kepuasan akan kami bagikan setelah webinar. Jadi mohon diperhatikan untuk sungguh-sungguh Bapak Ibu menuliskan alamat email dengan benar di angket tersebut sehingga sertifikat dapat kami proses dan kirim kepada Bapak Ibu dengan baik. Baik yang di Zoom maupun di YouTube, nanti mohon mengisi link angket kepuasan dan mengisi dengan alamat email yang benar karena di situ nanti akan kami kirimkan. Untuk berikutnya, we're so excited to introduce each of our panels. The first speaker, we have Dr. Willy Renandia from National Institute of Education and Young Technological University. He will explain the theories of extensive reading, what is it and why and how do educators implement it in the classrooms. The second speaker, we have Bu Anita Kurniawati Hadianto MPhum. She's faculty of language. She's from Faculty of Language and Arts from Universitas Kristen Satya Wacana in Central Java. She will later explain how to assess extensive reading in the classrooms. Last but not least, we have Pak Albert Rufinus, PhD as the third speaker. From Sekolah Tinggi Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan Pamane Talino, Kalimantan Barat. He will discuss extensive reading from the perspective of semiotics. We see that the issue of extensive reading is widely important, especially for now. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Pak Willy Renandia. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Let me just share my screen first. I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm on. Good morning, everyone. My name is Willy Renandia. I teach at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Although I'm based in Singapore, but I travel quite a bit in the old days, not currently, to different places in Asia to give workshops and to give presentations at conferences and things like that. But more recently, all my presentations have been Zoom-based and done on a remote basis. Today, I am privileged to share with you some ideas about extensive reading. I will talk about what extensive reading is and how is it different from intensive reading, and why extensive reading is important in language education, and what we can do to apply extensive reading in our different teaching context. Again, my focus will be on the what and the why of extensive reading. And Ibu Anita from Satya Wacana University, we look like brother and sister, but we are not. We are related in some way because we have common interest.
Bu Korinta boleh di mute. Terima kasih, maaf.
Sorry. Yes, we're not related. We're not biologically related, but we have common interest in that we believe that literacy is important. And we also believe that extensive reading is one of the best ways that we can, apply in the language classroom to help our students develop their literacy, either in the first language or in a second language. So later, Ibu Anita will talk about assessment, how we can assess extensive reading in the classroom. Okay, I think I'm going to start with a quiz. I'm a teacher, I'm a language teacher, and I often begin my lesson by giving my students a quiz, a very, very simple quiz for you to look at. Are you all ready? Here is my quiz. I'm going to show you a small text, a quotation actually from a book.
Di ini lagi.
Disilang. Hey.
Ini loh.
Hey, Bu Sinta, I think you need to mute your. Yes, thank you, Bu Sinta. Yes. So I'm going to show you a small text, and then I'm going to ask you what approach is the text describing. There you go. Okay, let's read this slowly because this seems to be a very, very important quotation from a book. Rarely in language education do we find a teaching approach. I think you need to yes, please do that.
Mohon di-mute agar kami bisa melanjutkan presentasi ini. Maaf, Pak Willy. Thank you. Host, please.
Okay, no problem. let me read this again for us. Rarely in language education do we find a teaching approach that is so universally hailed as beneficial, important, and necessary, and yet is so underutilized and even ignored in many different language teaching contexts. So the question to you is, what teaching approach is this? What is being described here? Any thoughts? Yes, the quote actually is describing a teaching approach known as extensive reading. Now, what is interesting to me is this. It's universally hailed as beneficial. Universally means everyone. If you speak to people, if you ask teachers, if you ask parents, they will tell you the same thing, that reading is important, extensive reading is necessary if we want our students to develop, their literacy. And yet, this particular approach is very, very underutilized. And in many different places, now this approach is ignored completely. So today, in my presentation today, I'm going to try to convince everyone in the audience that extensive reading is indeed beneficial for everyone, for young children, for teenagers, for adults, for younger adults, for older adults, for everyone basically. I need to show you this book by Richard Day. Now, Richard Day is, one of the most important figures in extensive reading. It was this book that he wrote in 1998 that got people actually interested in looking at extensive reading and exploring its application in language teaching. Tomorrow, actually, he will be giving a presentation together with John McAllister And the webinar is organized by an association, Extensive Reading Association in Indonesia, known as IERA. So if you want to hear from him directly, you might want to try to sign up for this special event, which is happening tomorrow at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Okay. Okay, you may be wondering, in addition to Richard Day and Willy Renandia and Anita, who are other people who will be saying the same thing about the importance or the benefits of extensive reading? I have two photos there. These are lecturers, language educators from Indonesia, Ibu Ivon from Malang, and then Ibu Mita from Sanata Dharma University. And there are many other people from different parts of the world. Alan Maley from the UK, one of the best ELT writers and authors. Christine Nuttall, a reading specialist, and then Stephen Krashen and me. And a colleague of mine at NIE Singapore, and also Ibu, what's the name again, Anita? Ibu Yusefa. Sorry, I almost forgot the name. Ibu Yusefa, who is the chair of the ERA, Extensive Reading Foundation in Indonesia. So hopefully after my presentation today, you will also feel the same way. You will also be able to say that, well, yes, extensive reading is so important, so beneficial for our students. About 2 or 3 years ago, I attended a conference in Yogyakarta, organized by Asia, the Asia TEFL organization. And there was one person whom I deeply respect, Paul Nation. He's been around for many, many years, and he is probably one of the most well-known English language specialists in the world. So I went there, I attended the session, and waiting for him to say this, and he did actually say that the #1 way to improve English language proficiency is through extensive reading. Now, I think I've shown you a number of people who will be supporting, who will be with me in saying that extensive reading actually is good. Let me take it further and share with you why some people believe that reading is so magical. Now, here is an author, a writer, a novelist. The name is Lisa Lee. She is not somebody who teaches language or who teaches English, but she is a writer. I mean, she has written a lot of books and novels. And there's something that she says which catches my attention. And this is what she said. Read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. I think what she's saying here is that this is what happens if you do extensive reading, because you'll be able to read a lot of books, you'll be able to read a lot of stories. And when that happens, the result of that is that your language will develop, beautifully. Your words means your language. You'll be able to use a lot of words. You'll be able to use language smoothly and easily and effortlessly as well. But you may be asking, why 1,000 words? Is it possible for our children, for teenagers, for our high school students to read 1,000 books? The answer is, I think it is possible. Now, here is an example. Now, this teenager is a Korean girl, name is Sodam, and she did exactly that. She read actually over 1,000 books. And what is interesting is that she started reading when she was still in primary school in grade 4. And 4 years later, she became so good, she became so proficient in English. And her English, she was able to speak the language so fluently. And she won, as a result, many awards. So she took part in a lot of competitions held in Korea, and she won almost every single award in the competition. She was so good, she was so fluent in English because she has read so many books. Well, you may be thinking that, well, that's in Korea. We are in Indonesia, we are in the Philippines, we are in Vietnam, or we are in many other places. It doesn't happen in other places. That is simply not true. Let me take you to Vietnam. Now here is a boy, about 16 or 17 years old. The same thing happens. He read a great deal. He enjoyed reading. And after a while, his English language developed so well that at age 17, when he took the IELTS test, his overall score was 7+. The most improvement was in his ability to express himself fluently, orally in speaking. That's Vietnam. Let me take you now to another place in Thailand, the same thing. Now this girl, still very young, 23 years old. Interestingly, she is a PhD student currently, studying ELT in one of the best universities in Thailand, Thammasat University. What she did, interestingly, she did not enjoy reading, but she enjoyed watching movies, watching cartoons. The same thing happens because the theory, the principle behind extensive reading is the same. You need to be exposed to a lot of language in order for you to grow linguistically, in order for you to develop your English language proficiency. So after watching so many cartoon movies, her English proficiency went up. And last time she took the IELTS test, her score was 8.0, which is almost C2 on the CFR band scale. Now, here are some other examples of people who have read a great deal, people from Indonesia, people from Vietnam, Indonesia, and also from Korea. These people have been able to develop their English language skills successfully through reading or through extensive listening. Okay, that's the introduction. Let me now go a little bit more deeply into two major approaches that we often use in our teaching of language. I'm sure you're familiar with these two approaches to teaching reading in the classroom. The first one, the left-hand side, is called intensive reading, and the right-hand side is known as extensive reading. Intensive reading usually happens in the classroom, and extensive reading usually happens outside the classroom. Yeah. I'm going to explain the differences between these two approaches so that you have a very, very clear idea about the differences between the two. And eventually, you'll be able to make informed decisions about what you want to do, whether you want to spend more time doing intensive reading or whether you want to spend a lot more time doing extensive reading with your students. Hopefully, after today's session, you will be able to say that, well, I think from now on, we need to spend more time giving students more experiences in extensive reading. I want to talk about four things when I look at the differences between intensive and extensive reading. I'm going to look at the differences between the two in terms of the objectives of teaching, in terms of the materials that are needed, in terms of the tasks and activities that we usually do when we carry out an intensive reading lesson or an extensive reading activity. And finally, I will also be talking about the different roles of teachers and students in these two approaches. And later on, after comparing and contrasting these two approaches, I will share with you the different impacts or the different effects that these two approaches have on students' language development. Let me begin with the learning objectives. Okay. Let me begin with the intensive reading approach. Usually, when we teach reading in the classroom, this is the traditional way of teaching reading in the classroom. There are four things that are often the focus of our teaching. Number one, language goal. We want to teach some new words, for example. We want to teach some new grammatical structures in the reading lesson. Number two, we also want to help our students understand the main ideas, understand the key, details from the text. In other words, we often focus on the content as well. And very often, we also teach what has been called skills and strategies. how to make inferences, how to summarize information from the text and things like that. And finally, we also want to spend some time teaching how the text is organized and also how to help the students to think more deeply about the content of the text. So this is what normally happens in an intensive reading lesson. Very systematic, very rigorous, very organized, very structured. What about extensive reading? Extensive reading has a different set of objectives. Let me share with you the main objectives of extensive reading. Hopefully you'll be able to say that, wow, they are so different. In extensive reading, we want the students to be able to read the text quickly, number one. Number two, enjoyably. And number three, with enough comprehension. Just enough is enough. You don't need to get the students to understand every single thing in the text. As long as they have a general gist of the text, that should be okay. And ideally, you should not also be using a dictionary in the classroom. So very different approaches to helping students to learn to read in the classroom, yeah? So that's the learning objectives. To summarize, on the left-hand side, there's a lot of thinking happening. Learning is very serious, but on the other hand, on the extensive reading side, learning is supposed to be fun. Learning is supposed to be a place. Extensive reading is a place where the students can have a lot of joy and pleasure when they're doing the reading, because the text is easy and the text is interesting as well. Okay, that's the objectives. What about the materials, the texts that we often use in intensive reading lessons and in extensive reading lessons? Are they the same? The answer is they should not be the same. In intensive reading lesson, the text is usually very short, sometimes only 1 page long, and sometimes even shorter, 1 or 2 paragraphs. And the language is difficult. It takes forever for the students to understand every single word in the text. And finally, the content is or may not be very interesting. The content usually is uninteresting if you ask your students. They will tell you, teacher, the text that we're using today is really not very interesting for me. In extensive reading, the text is usually longer. Now, longer doesn't mean more difficult, because longer text can also be easy, which is another important feature of extensive reading materials. It has to be easy. It has to be at the student's level. It cannot be higher, yeah, at the student's level. And sometimes it can also be slightly below the student's level. Remember, for students who are not used to reading in a new language, it's very tough for them to read a text, even if the text is at their level. So anything below their level is also okay. More importantly, the content will have to be really interesting, really engaging. Why is engagement important? Here are 2 experts talking about the importance of materials that are engaging. Brian Tomlinson and his wife, Masuhara. They say materials should engage the emotions of the learner. Emotions mean you have to feel something. You have to feel happy. You have to feel excited. You have to be, if the story is sad, then you have to feel sorrowful. If the main character is terrible, then you should feel angry as well. Now, this is the kind of things, this is the kind of emotional engagement that, according to these 2 experts, promote language learning in the classroom. And I will say yes to that. In language learning, emotions is so important. Now, this is the kind of things that will help the students remember what they have seen, remember what they have heard, remember what they have read in a book. Okay, let me show you some photos here. Do you think the students are on task or engaged? A quick answer, on task or engaged? I think maybe you're saying yes, maybe they are both on task and engaged, but probably mostly on task. They may not be engaged emotionally. Look at this other photo. Are the students engaged, on task? It's difficult to say. They may be engaged, but if you look at the faces of the two boys sitting in front, I think they're thinking about something else. They're thinking about lunch maybe, or they're thinking about what happened last night at home, or maybe at the playground. What about this picture? I think chances are they are more engaged emotionally. Look at their faces. They look curious, they look happy, they look very, very eager and excited as well, yeah? Look, what about these kids? They're all reading. Are they on task, engaged? I think they are both. They are both on task and engaged. Here are some other examples to show you that engagement in reading is possible, and engagement in reading is associated with learning, and engagement in reading is associated with extensive reading. Here's a great example of kids who are fully engaged in reading. Another example. Okay, now why is engagement important? Now, recent research shows very clearly that engagement is, cognitive engagement, affective engagement are associated with a higher level of learning outcomes. Now, I came across this book, which I found to be very, very interesting. A couple of senior educators from the US, they wanted to find out whether students in schools were actually just on task or off task, or they are engaged in the classroom. The results of their observations, traveling to different places in the US, visiting schools, observing lessons, very interesting. This is what they have found. The number of students who were off task, who were not paying attention in the lesson, is very small. So that's good news for us, yeah? The number of students who are on task, quite high. In other words, they saw the students doing something in the classroom. But when they probe deeper and try to find out the number of students who were truly engaged, who were truly learning, is quite small, only 6%. That to me is very, very interesting. And our job as a teacher is to be able to engage students in their learning so that their learning outcomes will increase a great deal. Now here's another quiz for you. I've just shown you some ideas about extensive reading, that in extensive reading, the materials have to be easy, and the goals is for the students to enjoy whatever they have read. A quick quiz for you. Let's say that you get very excited after today's session and you decided, hey, maybe I should ask my students to read the newspaper, 15 minutes of compulsory daily reading. Is this extensive reading or not? I want to hear your responses later at the end of my session, okay? Moving on now, we have looked at objectives, we have looked at materials. Now we are looking at tasks and activities. What do we do when we teach reading, intensive reading, and when we teach extensive reading? Are the tasks and activities the same or different? The left-hand side, I think you're very familiar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining what these are. I think you're familiar with that. In your reading lesson, you do pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading activities. You do a lot of predicting skills, inferring skills, and so on and so forth. And you end your lesson with a set of reading comprehension questions for the students to answer. Extensive reading, on the other hand, is different. You don't give them a test. You don't do activities before or even during. You may want to do some post-reading activities, but that's about all. So typically in extensive reading lessons, all the students do is they read and they enjoy what they read. And they may take notes occasionally, things that are of interest to them. And finally, maybe doing some fun after reading activities. Small, interesting, and fun post-reading activities. Nothing of the sort that we usually ask students to do, like summarizing the text, for example. A summary is okay, but don't do it too often because that is not a very exciting activity for the students. Moving on now to the role of the teacher and the learner. Are they the same or are they different? They're not the same. In the intensive reading lessons, the teacher is probably the most important person. The teacher decides almost anything, almost everything that happens in the lesson. The teacher decides on the goal, the teacher decides on the materials, the teacher decides on the tasks and activities. So everything is very teacher-centered, if you like. Extensive reading, on the other hand, is learner-driven. So we want our students to set their own goals. Maybe, in the next 3 weeks or in the next month or so, they want to be able to finish reading 2 books. The materials, they also choose the kind of books, the kind of materials that they want to read, and they also are free to choose the kind of tasks that they want to do after they finish reading. So the roles of the teacher in an extensive reading program essentially is this too. Number 1, be a good model. Number 2, be a motivator. Now these two are very much related. The idea here is very simple. If you want your students to develop a good reading habit, then you need to show your students that you yourself is a great reader. If you don't read yourself, it will be very, very difficult for you to, to get your students to enjoy reading and to develop a good reading habit. Motivation is another thing. Your main job is not to teach skills. Your main job is not to teach the meaning of new words in a text. Your main job actually is to motivate your students to read more. Okay, here is an example from Singapore. This is a photo of a teacher in a school in Singapore. Now, the school is implementing extensive reading where the students are encouraged to read a lot, and the teacher gives a model, gives a real example by being a reader themselves, and they have to show what they have read in the school gallery for everyone to see. Yeah, so that is how you can showcase, you can demonstrate to your students that you also have developed a good reading habit that you want to share with your students. On the importance of motivation or encouragement. Now here is Donalyn Miller, a primary school teacher who wrote a very, very powerful book called The Book Whisperer. Now, she has this to say to people who will tell you that, well, my students don't like to read. They like to play games, they like to check their social media status, but they don't like to read. That is not true. This is what she said. Students will read if we give them books and the time and the motivation. Not just simple, easy motivation, but enthusiastic encouragement for the students to pick up a book and start reading. Now here is a case study. Now here is a guy whom I know very well. He happened to live in the same house with me many years ago. Now what is interesting is that when he was in secondary school, he did not enjoy reading. He did not like reading at all. Now what happens was that one day his teacher brought a book, a storybook, into the classroom. And he let this boy borrow that book. And immediately after, he started to read that book. And he started asking his father to buy the same books by the same author. He had a whole bookshelf full of books written by this author. And this boy happens to be my son. So there's nothing like children or kids who don't like to read. What happens is that there are children who have not found the books that they really, really want to read. Now, here is a very interesting survey done in Singapore. A colleague of mine gave out a big survey to about 1,000 teenagers in Singapore, asking them actually what kind of books they actually want to read, because schools in Singapore have a lot of books in their libraries, but the kids don't go, the children don't go to the library to borrow the books. The idea is simple, the reason is simple, because these kids are not able to find the books that they want to read. So this survey becomes very useful because now you know these are the kind of books that the kids want to read. Books like Harry Potter, books like Perry Jason, Hunger Games, and a lot of the books that these kids actually want to read. Unfortunately, these books are not available in the library. Okay, I'm coming to the end of my presentation. We have looked at the objectives of extensive reading and intensive reading. We have looked at the tasks, the materials, look at the tasks and activities, and also look at the roles of the teachers in the extensive reading program. Now, what is the impact of intensive reading and extensive reading on language learning? I think you may be wondering. Now, here is my understanding of the potential impact or effect of intensive reading and extensive reading. We expect our students in intensive reading to become better at thinking about the deeper meaning of the text. But I put a question mark there because very often at the end of our teaching, students are still not able to think deeply about what they have read. Critical readers, question mark as well. Enjoy learning? Not really. But the last point, yes, you may expect the students to do well on the reading test. The reason is the reading test is very much like the intensive reading lesson that we do in the classroom. Now, if you look at the benefits, the impact of extensive reading on student learning, on the right-hand side, students may be expected to develop a wider vocabulary. Their grammar becomes more sophisticated, they become more fluent readers, and they may develop a love for reading. And the last point is that their writing skills, their ability to write, to express themselves in writing, also develop very well. Now here is an example. You may be wondering if you need an example of, maybe these benefits only happen or apply for students, but interestingly, it also applies to teachers. Now here is a teacher from Vietnam. She also developed a high level of proficiency as a result of doing a lot of reading when she was younger. She started reading at age 13. Remember, she studied English in a context just like in Indonesia, in a foreign language context. So language was not widely used outside the classroom. Now, what happened was she started reading a small text in English and she found the text really interesting, funny stories. She then developed a positive, a happy feeling about reading funny stories. And then she started to read more, and she started to read more and more and more. And when I met her about 4 or 5 years ago in Vietnam, she told me that she just took the IELTS test and the score was 8.5. That to me is very, very high. There's another thing that she said to me. Hey, Dr. Willie, one major benefit for me when I did extensive reading was this. Reading makes reading easier, and reading makes writing also easier. So that you can see the benefit of reading on your reading skills and also on your writing skills. Last slide. I hope you remember this. Yeah. Please take a photo if you can. I think you need to really plant this in your heart and in your head as well. I know that many people have been asking this question. What is the best way to teach or to learn English? What is the best approach? This is the best approach. Yeah, a lot of people are saying this, And yet, many people are ignoring this, and this approach is still very much underutilized in many places in the world. Here are some references for you. Look at the last 3 blue booklets. Those booklets are extensive reading guides written in different languages, written in Bahasa Indonesia, written in Japanese, written in English, and written in many other languages. They can be downloaded for free. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. And after my presentation, I will give you the link to my PowerPoint slides. So you can download my PowerPoint slides if you click on the link that I will provide in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Willy. It's been such a tremendous presentation. I think it's very inspiring to know that basically students will read if we give them both time and the enthusiastic encouragement to do so. That note really sticks on me. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now joining us, Bu Anita. The floor is yours, Ibu.
Okay, thank you, Pak Kunto. So I will share my screen now. Okay, can you all see my slides?
Yes, we can do.
Yes, thank you. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So this is what I would like to share you today, assessment in an ER program. So topic about assessment in an ER program is always interesting to discuss because based on our experience in ER Roadshow 2018 and 2019 and some virtual talk and ngabuburit, questions about assessment is always appeared. Uh, okay, so this is what I would like to try to share my insights, and hopefully my insights can be valuable. Now I'll start with this 4 things first, the positions of ER in the curriculum. So there are 4 things according to Dan Bamford 1998. So ER in a curriculum can be as a separate or standalone course or as part of an existing reading course, as a non-credit addition to an existing course, or as an extracurricular activity. But no matter which positions of ER in our curriculum, the questions remain the same about the assessment. If ER is as a standalone course, how can we assess our students? Even if an ER is only an extracurricular activity, the question is still the same. How to assess the students? Because everybody, all students, other teachers, school headmaster, they love to see numbers or students' progress in the form of numbers. Now, next slide. Hang on. Now, these are some questions. What are we going to do with the follow-up reading activities? I think Pak Willy has mentioned before about the reading tasks that can appear in an ER program, and we usually call it as a follow-up reading activities. So it can be in the form of poster presentation, writing something, but something that has to be fun. So what are we going to do with that? Are we going to assess that or not? And then shall we assess our ER students? How shall we assess our students without jeopardizing the ER basic principles? I think if you are familiar with the ER basic principles, it has been mentioned again and again that there shouldn't be any tests, any formal tests, because ER should be fun. And so if we have a kind of assessment in an ER class, so what should the assessment measure? Now let's see some experts, what the experts say about this one. Starting from Brown, he said that something like this. Assessment in an ER class is a kind of a unique challenge, yeah, for assessment purpose. And then another complication is assessing extensive reading is that the expected response from the reader is likely to involve much written or sometimes oral performance as reading. So actually, if we can be very honest with ourselves, if we want to assess students in an ER class, we don't really assess their reading. But then what we assess is actually the product or the follow-up reading activity, which can be in the form of poster presentation or bookmark or the student sharing session. So it's not purely the reading itself, but the result of their reading. And then Day 2015 mentioned that actually there is no widespread agreement on exactly what an ER program is based on the result of the survey. So he did a kind of survey of several ER programs, and then he tried to investigate to what extent those ER program, what is it, implemented the ER principle. And this is what he found out that yeah, some what is it, implemented many of the principle, while some other implemented only some of the principle. But it doesn't really matter. No widespread agreement on exactly what an ER program is. And based on the result of the survey, it can be claimed that an ER program uses some of the 10 principles. What I'm trying to say is that if in your context you need the kind of assessment, uh, I think if I may interpret what they mentioned, it's still okay as long as you still implement some of the basic principles like ER should be fun, shouldn't read easy material, shouldn't can choose the book that they love to read, and then no formal tests. But if you have to give a kind of assessment or task activity, it should be something fun. Or we can always refer that to the follow-up, the fun follow-up reading activity, something like that. And then this one, he also back to 2002, they also mentioned that we offer our top 10 principles for teaching extensive reading as a tool for professional development. We encourage teachers to use them as a way to examine their beliefs about reading in general and extensive reading in particular, and the ways they teach foreign language. So it's up to many things. It's up to our belief uh, and also the context where we have the ER class. Now, the next one is I will share a little bit about ER in our department. So I'm from UKSW, from Faculty of Language and Art, and we have 3 study programs. And I'm actually from English Language Education Program, and this is the ER in my context. So ER in my department is required for credit course. So it means that the students have to take this course in the first semester. So it's a 4 credit course. We meet twice a week, 2 hours for each meeting. And the aim of our ER program is at increasing students' interest toward reading in English. So we want to build uh, or to enhance the students' motivation to love reading. Yeah. So it's like a dilemma actually for me as a teacher and course coordinator, because at one side, I want to build to introduce the joy of reading. But then on the other side, in our context is a required course, which means that the student needs what is it? Grade, yeah, point. I need to decide whether not just pass or fail, but the ABCD. Yeah, yang grade A itu for what kind of students, which point, or which students deserve A, which students deserve A, please, something like that. So it's a kind of dilemma for me. And in this class, we also require the students to read large amount of longer, easy to understand material in and outside the classroom at their own pace and and level. Jadi the students mostly read outside the class because they have target number of pages that they have to complete in one semester, which is 1,250. That means that they have to read within 10 weeks, they have to read around 125 pages. But in class, we have the so-called DEAR, or drop everything and read, or other may use the term silent reading or sustained silent reading or something like that. But we spend around 15 to 20 minutes in our class meeting before we start the lesson to read together with the student. And then the activities that we are doing in class are taken from these books, yeah. Pamphlet and Day, 2004, extensive reading activity for teaching language. And we also have more activities from Jacob and Renandia, 2015. Now, related to the assessment itself, based on my experience as a course coordinator for about, I started ER course in 2013 or 14. So it's almost, no, it's not 2013, 2003 or 2004. So it's quite long. And I can share you that if I have to classify assessment in our ER program, so I could come up with these 4 things. So assessment to monitor the students' progress, assessment to motivate the students to read, assessment to evaluate the students' reading, and assessment to reflect the student reading progress. Okay, let me share you one by one what I mean by assessment to monitor the students' progress. Now, ER principles, what is it? Is really terikat ya, integrated or mengandung learner autonomy. So there is a learner principles of learner autonomy in ER principles. So here we teach the students to try or to be able to monitor their own reading progress. How to do that? We use this kind of reading record. This is also taken from Day and Bamford book. Saya lupa tadi judulnya apa. Okay, but that is taken from that book. So here, the idea here is the students has to complete this form after they finish reading a book. It doesn't matter whether they can finish reading the book or not. Sometimes they decide not to continue reading the whole book because the book is not interesting, and that is okay. But they still have to complete this form. Why? Because the form will be used as a monitor so that the students and the teacher can check together whether the students, how many times the students complete reading the whole book, or how many times the student not complete reading the book. And then after that, we can discuss the problems. So that is the first thing, what I can share. Assessment to monitor the students' progress. And then the second one, okay, maybe if you want to look at this a little bit. So it starts from the book title and then the level, starting date and finish date. So we can check. So for example, if they start on the 2nd of September and then they finish on the 12th of September, there might be something wrong with that, with the book or with the students themselves. And then reading time in minutes, and then the real pages and weighted pages. So as I mentioned before, it's still okay for them not to complete reading the whole book, not to finish reading the whole book. If the story is not interesting, they can always change new book. I think that's also in line with the principles of extensive reading. Now, the next one is assessment to motivate the students to read. Now, it can be in the form of activities like poster presentation or book sharing, where the students can share the book that they have read, and they can discuss, they can talk about the book with their friends, with the hope that their friends can be interested in reading the same book as they are, something like that. So we have we can have this kind of activities. And then you might wonder, what about the rubric? How to assess that? Actually, it's up to us, if I may say. If we want to assess the students holistically, that's okay. If we want to assess them analytically, that's also okay. And here, what we have in our department is something like this. We have this kind of rubric to assess poster presentation. And about the assessment point, feel free to change, feel free to adapt, feel free to match with what you have in your context. So it doesn't have to be like this. Now, this one is, as I mentioned before, book sharing. So assessment activities or assessment tasks that can be used to motivate the students to read. So by having a kind of discussion, they can talk, they can discuss, they can share. Hopefully, they can motivate one to another. Again, how to assess them? It's up to us. It doesn't have to be in points all the time, but then it can also be in the form of like a very simple rubric like, uh, do you like your friend's explanation? Yeah, so rate from 1 to 5. And then, do you think that your friend's explanation to the story or to the book that they have read is clear enough? 1 to 5, something like that. Or do you want to read the book that your friend has shared? So it can be in the form of simple questions, guideline like that. And then, yeah, we can be very generous in terms of point or grade. So if the students can submit everything, can complete everything, then we can just give score, for example, 8 or 10. Yeah. So we can be very generous because the idea is they have complete certain tasks and maybe they are able to motivate one to another. Now, the third one is assessment to evaluate students' reading. I think every teacher's, what is it, always wants to know whether the student really read the book or not. When I started the ER course, I also have this kind of dilemma. If I give my student 8, I have to be sure that that students deserve to have 8. If I give students 5, yeah, it's really because their work is not really okay. Now, I have that kind of dilemma as well. And I think it's okay for us to try to evaluate the student reading. But again, as Pak Willy mentioned before, the activities should be in a form of fun activity, not in a, what is it, burdening or stressful activity, answering comprehension questions, ya, atau mungkin vocabulary exercise and things like that. But you can have something like ask the students to share about their favorite scene. Ask the students to write an online review about the book that they have read. Ask the students to write a letter to the main character. By doing that, based on my experience, we can check whether the student really read the book and do not understand that, or when the student read the book and understand that, or when the students only listen from their friend. Sometimes we can figure it out quite easily. Yeah. But I think if what I want to say here is it's still okay to assess the student for checking whether the students really understand the book they have read or not. But of course, it should be in a fun and engaging activity, not stressful activity. Okay, and then the last one is this is what we have, assessment to reflect the student's progress. So as I mentioned before, extensive reading principle is very or has very tight connection with learner autonomy. So here we always try to introduce or to create awareness of our students to do a kind of reflection. So here, what we are doing is our students are asked to compare what they think and feel toward reading at the beginning and at the end of the course. So at the beginning of the ER program, we usually explore the students' attitude. toward reading, what they feel, what they like about reading, how they feel about reading, whether whether they read a lot or what kind of book they read. So we usually that during our first few meetings, and then at the end of the course, maybe around on week 13 or 14, we ask them again to think about a similar questions, what they think about reading, and almost at the end of the semester, and what they feel about that, something like that. And then usually we ask them to compare whether they have the same attitude or different attitude. If they have the same attitude, ya, dari tidak suka jadi tetap tidak suka. Ya, for example, they may start with the negative attitude, and then at the end they still have that negative attitude. Yeah, we should be what is it? Yeah, we should be able to try to accept that, because maybe we haven't really changed the students' attitude. But based on my experience, uh, students rarely say that. They say that, okay, at first, at the beginning of the semester, I don't really like reading, but then at the end of the semester, I slightly like reading. So none of my students really say that they don't like it at all. Maybe because of the assessment, yeah. They are probably afraid of bad grade or something like that. But I keep on saying to my students, just be honest. If you still have negative attitude toward reading, just say it. But then give me explanation why you still don't like it. Something like that. And then we can also ask the student to check their reading report. So the reading report that I shared before can be used to have a kind of discussion with the student. And then, yeah, so for example, we can ask them to identify as well which book that they read the fastest, which book that they read the slowest, so that we can, keep on checking whether the student read the appropriate book or not. The appropriate book here means the book is not too difficult or not too easy for the student. Well, I think that's all that I can share to you. These are the references. Hopefully, my experience, yeah, can provide you with an insight on assessment in extensive reading program. I think that's all, Pak Kunto. Thank you.
You're welcome, Bu Anita. Thank you so much for sharing tons of valuable insights on how to assess extensive reading. And it is really, really valuable to know the assessment to monitor the students' reading progress, and assessment to motivate students to read, assessment to evaluate and also reflect students' reading progress. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And last speaker, but not least, we have Pak Albert Rufinus. For Pak Albert, the floor is yours.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Good morning, everyone. Adil Kak Talino, Bacuramin Kak Saruga, Basengat Kak Jubata. Yeah, nice to have this kind of very, very good webinar. Good morning, Dr. Willie Renindia. Thank you very much, the Honorable Willie Renindia. Good morning, Bu Esther Anita. Yeah, thank you for the two speakers, especially that have been in STKIP Pamane Talino by virtual online. Yeah. Okay, we invite you all to come to Ngabang, Kalimantan Barat. Hope if the new normal is okay. Right, I'm Albert Rufinus. I'm in STKIP Pamane Talino. We have been here for about 3 years. It is a young School, College of Education, Sekolah Tinggi Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan, STKIP, Pamane Talino. Let me say Pamane. Pamane here means, yeah, smart, clever, pandai. Talino, that is human, manusia. Yeah. So our dreams that to make all the people, especially local people, the students, the young people here, yeah, to go to school, to go to the university, especially to education field, that is college. Right, my part, I will share about 10 slides as the additional ideas for the last two, that is the very well and excellent presentation and ideas from Dr. Willy Renandia. Thank you, Doctor. And then from Ibu Esther Anita. Thank you. Terima kasih, Ibu. Okay, now let me share.
Excuse me, Albert, are you still with
Next
us?
time.
I think
Yeah,
there's, yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah, it takes time because slow about the internet here. All right, thank you. Yeah, we are talking about extensive reading. My part is on learning with science in reading stories.
Excuse me, Albert, it doesn't share your screen. Can you please try to screen share again? Hello, Albert. Hello, Albert. Sorry, everyone. Apparently, there's a connectivity problem with the network there. We tried to reconnect with Pa Albert Rufino's presentation. Yeah, the audio and the video is also gone. We do apologize for this inconvenience, everyone. I'm sorry. Hello, Albert. Can you hear us? All right. So apparently there's a slightly problem with the connectivity there in West Kalimantan. So we would like to proceed to the question and answer while waiting for Pak Albert Rufinus to fix the internet problem. So Pak Willy and Bu Anita, we do have a couple questions addressed from the participants. The first question would be for Pak Willy. The question is how to encourage students' critical thinking skill, whether or not it's going to be the best through intensive or extensive reading, and why. So how do basically we encourage students' critical thinking through reading, or is it better to go with intensive or extensive reading? And for Bu Anita, there's this one question: how can we set the level of reading skill, especially for university students, since they have various background knowledge, culture, and competence? Once again, how can we set the level of reading skill, especially for university students, since they have various background knowledge, culture, and competence? We would like to first offer the room for Pak Willy. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Unfortunately, the answer is not very straightforward. It's not very simple. But let me try to explain. I think both are important. Both intensive and extensive reading, lessons are important for our students, but they are important in different ways. Extensive reading will improve students' language skills. Their literacy will develop a great deal, plus their knowledge, because they read a lot of books and each books have different contents. So their knowledge base will develop a great deal. And I think we know that knowledge is important for people to become critical. You cannot be critical without having sufficient knowledge base. Yeah. So I'm often surprised when people just criticize other people's ideas, but the basis for their criticism is really unfounded. You cannot be critical without having sufficient knowledge about things. If you ask me about the political situation in Indonesia, for example, I may not be able to be critical. I can criticize, the situation, but I cannot be critical because I don't know much about the political condition in Indonesia. Okay, that's point number one. So extensive reading will improve your language and will improve your knowledge base. And hopefully, with that improvement, you'll be able to use your thinking skills better. Now, what about intensive reading? Now, here is my take. I think there is another question related to intensive and extensive reading as well. The question is, which one is more effective?
Please feel free to jump in.
Yes. Yes, intensive reading, if you do it well, I think you will be able to help your students to do well on their examination. If you do a good job of teaching intensive reading, I think your students will be able to do well on the examination, on the school examination, on the national examination, and things like that. But does it mean that they'll be able to think critically? The answer is it depends. If you are teaching critical reading skills to students whose English language proficiency is minimal, I think you may not be using your classroom time optimally. If you want to teach critical thinking skills, I think the best thing for you to do is to do it in Bahasa Indonesia or in the student's local language. If you do it in English, and when the students are still at the lower end of the proficiency scale, then they have to work so hard with the language itself because they're having problem with the language. And because of that, they may not be able to use their thinking ability well. So if you ask me, when will be the best time for you to teach intensive reading? My quick answer is in English. My quick answer will be when the students have reached a certain level of proficiency. Now, this level is often known as a threshold of proficiency. A threshold of proficiency is somewhere in the intermediate level. If you use the European scale, it should be at the B1 or B2. So when your language proficiency is at that level, I think it's easier and it's more effective for you to teach intensive reading and also for you to get the students to be more discerning, more critical in their reading, trying to understand the biases that the author has, trying to distinguish between facts and opinions. I think that will be more doable when the students have reached that level of proficiency. So again, a quick answer is both are important. but both are important in different ways and under different conditions as well. So that will be my very, very long response to your very short question.
Thank you so much, Pak Willy. That's a really, really great insight for that question. We move on to Bu Anita, Ibu.
Oh, sorry, can you please repeat the questions again?
Definitely, ma'am. So the question is, how can we set the level of reading skill, especially for university students, since they have various background knowledge, culture, and competence?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Pak. Uh, okay, so to answer that questions, let me share you this one. Now, actually, right now we are living in a very modern era. You can always use what do you call that program like ER Central or the other one. What is Pak Willy's favorite?
X reading.
Yeah, yes, right. X reading. Now, if you have that kind of thing, or if you are lucky to have that kind of thing, then you can just ask the students to do some tests because that program help the students to find out their level. But if you don't have that kind of facility yet, like in my context, honestly, we haven't really used that kind of program. So we try to do a very traditional things, which is also taken from the book, yeah, the Bamboo book. So here, at the beginning of the semester, maybe second week, so we provide students with sample of the text from books, from Penguin Reader, from Cambridge, from Oxford Bookworm, from different level. We take one page and then we ask the student to read that. And then while they are reading that sample text, they have to circle or underlining words or phrases or section that they cannot understand or follow clearly. And then after the students finish, so we will, highlight that the students can start with the level with no more than 2 difficulties per page. But whether this is reliable or not can be yes, can be no, because sometimes different publishers have different level. But if we don't have any tool or any app yet, this is still worth trying or worth doing, so that at least the student know from which level they have to start reading. Of course, at the beginning, we will find that the students will read different level. So maybe one student can start reading from level 6, the other student can start reading from level 2 or level 3 or even level 1. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really matter because later what will be counted is the number of pages or the total number of pages. If the students can start from level 6, meaning that they can read one book each week. But if the student start from level 2 or level 1 or level 3, they need to read maybe 3 or 4 books every week with the expectation that after several weeks, they can go to or they can move to higher level. I think that is my answer. Perhaps Pak Willy later can add more ideas.
Thank you so much for the response, Ibu Anita. We would like to call upon Pak Albert Rufinus. Are you on, sir? Apparently, there's likely problem not only with the connectivity but also the computer. We are extremely sorry for this inconvenience, everyone. Um, if uh, if you don't mind, we would like to also proceed to the next question, which is very interesting in my opinion. Um, it's about the selections of the text. So there's this one question for Pak Willy and Bu Anita while waiting for Pak Albert. Selecting text having value and local wisdom is hard to do. So what are the criteria of selecting a good text in your opinion? Maybe Pak Willy first, and then maybe Bu Anita can jump in later. Thank you.
Yes, I think when we talk about reading, we usually consider two things. Number one is the language, and number two is the content. So from a language point of view, we want the text to be as easy as possible for the students. Now, what is easy for one student may not be easy for another student. But the point is, whatever books they select, they decide to read, will have to be easy for them. So what is easy for me may not be easy for Ibu Anita. What is easy for Ibu Anita may not be easy for Pak Kunto. So that's the language bit. And extensive reading works best when the students are able to read with understanding, easily and smoothly. Now this is very important. When they are able to read a book successfully, they will have this confidence. Their confidence level will go up and their motivation will increase. And they will tell you, teacher, please let me read more books because I enjoy reading the books. So easy is important. Again, the idea of easy is not easy for many teachers. Many teachers believe that learning will have to be difficult. The text will have to be difficult. The text will have to be above the student's level. Otherwise, they won't learn anything. I think that is sensible and that is logical. But from a language learning point of view, I think we got it all wrong. We can learn from easy text, actually. We can learn a lot from reading text that we are very familiar with. In fact, if you look at the literature, of young children learning to read, this is their first language, yeah, how they develop their literacy skill. Now, children tend to read the same kind of books, sometimes by the same author, sometimes by different authors, again and again, the same kind of books until they become so good and then they move on. So what happened there was they read easy, familiar texts. So young children will be reading, for example, Snow White, day 1. And day 2, another Snow White, different version. Day 3, another Snow White. Is that okay? Very okay, actually. And that's how they develop their literacy. But, strangely, in language teaching, we have this idea that we have to challenge our students with difficult text. If the text is not difficult, they won't learn anything. I think we got it all wrong. Because learning involves seeing the same things again and again. And this allows, students to develop a lot of good mental processes, useful processes like assimilation, like accommodation, like, integration. All these are mental things that can happen only when the students are reading a lot of easy materials, not when they are reading difficult materials. One of the questions asked me, am I still reading easy materials? Yes. When I pick up a book and I don't understand what the author is talking about on page 1, I will just put it away. I stop reading and I will give it to Bu Anita. Bu Anita, maybe you enjoy reading this. You can have my book. I think that is what happened to us as well. Yeah. For example, do you read Newsweek, for example? I can read Newsweek, but I don't enjoy reading it. So why should I? I enjoy reading, maybe apa ya sekarang ya, Detik or maybe Kompas or Tempo. Tempo is a little bit off these days, so I'm trying to avoid Tempo for the time being. But things that I can relate to. The other one is about content. Now, content is a sticky subject. I think this is a major concern for many people in education, for teachers, for parents. Parents and teachers want our children to read good books only. to read books that have moral values. I think that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. But in order for students to be able to read good books in English that contain moral values, I think they need to develop their proficiency first. Because books that have moral values are usually written in authentic, unabridged, non-graded language, usually very difficult. That will be the end. That will be the goal eventually. We want our students to later in life be able to read books, high quality books, literature, for example, maybe Hemingway's books and things like that. But these books are not easy to read. They're not interesting for many of our students. How many of you are interested in reading Siti Nurbaya, for example? I mean, it's a nice book. As an adult, we probably enjoy reading it. But as children, do they really enjoy reading Siti Nurbaya? Siti in Surabaya, maybe, but not Siti Nurbaya. So, yes, okay. My point again is extensive reading is a tool, is an approach to develop language proficiency. Anything that is easy, anything that is enjoyable, anything that will get the students to want to read more, anything that will get your students to tell you, teacher, now I can read with understanding. Please give me more books. That is your goal. Content comes later. When I was young, I read a lot of comic books, for example. I enjoyed reading comic books when I was young. Do I enjoy reading comics books now? Not really. Nope. I now read other things that are important to me. You want to know what books I'm reading now? I'll show it to you. It's right here. Don't know if you can see this.
Oh, we cannot really see that because of the virtual background, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Yes. The title of the book, let me read it to you. The title of the book is Late Bloomers: The Power of Patience in a World Obsessed with Early Achievement. Wow, that's a really, really good book. Late Bloomers. Itu bukan layu sebelum berkembang, tapi orang yang berkembangnya belakangan. Late Bloomers. That to me is very interesting because the book is saying that, hey, you don't stop learning. As you grow older, actually, it becomes easier for you to learn new things. So do not use that as an excuse. Hey, I'm 50 years old, I want to retire and I want to enjoy life. I think that is wrong. This guy from this book, the name of the guy is Professor Goodenough. Now, Professor Goodenough is interesting because at age 80 or 90, he had a new discovery. Itu yang menemukan lithium battery untuk charger itu ya, untuk electric cars itu yang beliau itu pada usia 80 atau 90 tahun. Isn't that amazing? So we can continue to bloom, to grow until when? Until the end of the world, basically.
Okay, thank you. Very nice point, sir. Thank you very much for that. I'm sorry, Bu Anita. Before before we proceed to that question, I think Pak Albert is now able to join us using the host. I think Pak Albert. Pak Albert, are you with us? Hello, Pak Albert. Still off. I'm so sorry. So, Bu Anita, would you please give some light about that point as well? We are so sorry.
Okay, so I see some questions here. I think there's one about when checking students' report, do you think there will be like...
Hello?
Oh, Pak Pets here. Okay.
Still off. I'm so sorry. So, Bu Anita, would you please give some light about that point as well? We are so sorry.
Okay, do you think there will be criteria for...
Here, I think there's one.
Wait, there's slightly technical problems as well. Albert, you might proceed to your presentation now, sir.
Okay. Okay, so I see some questions. I think there's one.
All right. Good morning again. Everyone can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. I was away because of that. Yeah. The internet, or maybe because of my laptop. Good morning again, Dr. Renandia. Good morning, Bu Anita.
Morning, Pak.
Morning.
Yeah, nice to see you. Nice to meet you on this online presentation and seminar. I'm Albert Rufinus from STKIP Pamane Talino. Let me address to say Adil Kak Talino, Bacuramin Kak Saruga, Basengat Kak Jubata. And usually people respond arus, arus, arus. That is, we agree. Yeah, Pak Kunto has talked about what it is about. It is the local people, especially Kanayat, Dayak Kanayat, philosophy expression. Okay, hope that I can have the time. I'm going to look at some points about extensive reading, especially in terms of science, how we can understand science and the meaning of science. This especially concerned with my PhD thesis in University of Malaya, Malaysia last time, that I'm talking about values in Malay, nilai-nilai kepahlawanan di dalam teks Takna Lawe bagi masyarakat mendalam Kalimantan Barat dari Dayak Kayan, semiotics analysis. So I'm using science here in terms of semiotics. That is the study of science itself. Okay, I think we agree that we live with science everywhere, anytime. Okay, so that I ask the question here, what? But what here, not only about the science, what that is about the extensive reading itself, and then why. I'm talking about why yes, why not about extensive reading, and then using science in extensive reading, especially in text, and more specifically, I'm talking about the stories, fiction, narrative, and in my part, I'm talking about narrative poetry, that is an epic, local epic, Takna Lawe, that is the epics, about 6,537 stanzas, a very long poem. And then how I'm trying to talk also about this extensive reading. That is a very good means, a very good medium, how the students can increase their English, especially. In our case, this is quite a problem, how the students are engaged in reading extensively. Okay. And then I'm talking about extensive reading itself. What is extensive reading? Again, this is just to refresh. It is an approach to second and foreign language reading. In our situation, in our context, we are talking about foreign language. English is a foreign language. Reading extensively, reading very easy, enjoyable materials, books, stories, news, or be text to promote reading speed and fluency. Yeah. And then the next, learning to read by actually reading rather than examining text, by studying their vocabulary, grammar, and phrases. Yeah, Dr. in India talk about this very much. And then Ibu Esther, Anita also talk about the same thing. That is when we talk about extensive reading, we talk about enjoyment is there, pleasure is there, talking about things. And then in my case, in my presentation today, I'm trying to look at extensive reading in terms of the text, the stories, yeah, and then how science take roles, and then how teachers can also take roles using extensive reading using some science. All right. Now I'm talking about the benefits. Yeah. Yeah, the benefits for readers in extensive reading. I compose it of 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the first, that is the opportunity to read longer reading materials, especially stories. So the students and we are, of course, we are free and we enjoy to choose the materials or maybe the stories here. And then we are free to read at our own or their own, the students' own speed and their own ability level. Yeah, can be in grade 1 through grade 6 or maybe through grade 12 for secondary schools, and then continued in the higher education level. And then to increase knowledge of the world. Yeah, I quoted this from Day and Bramford Creation Nation, especially in Dr. Renandia's article about extensive reading. Dr. India and Jacobs in 2003. Yeah. And then the next, that is to experience social and cultural life of the world. Not only the knowledge, but also the students may experience while having their reading, they experience social and cultural life of the world. They will adventure with the stories and then how the life, how people live in one place, where it is Western or Asian places, and then how their cultures there. Okay, it is a good way to have the experience through reading extensively. And then extensive reading is complementary to intensive reading, to isolate and raise awareness of this language leading to reading fluency, and also to read for language development. So because the students read a lot, many stories or maybe books they have read, and at the same time, they develop their own language, especially English. And in linguistic or social linguistic development, the readers or the students develop their pronunciation, that is for awareness of speech features. This is especially happening when the students read aloud or maybe in oral reading. In the classroom, the teacher may assign the students, let them read extensively, loudly, and the teacher will not be aware of their own reading of voices, whatever. Yeah, so let them have the opportunity. And then develop communication skills. In reading, they will retell their stories. They will talk between themselves. Teachers will ask the students, and the students will talk to the teachers, or maybe they have their own dialogues. They set up dialogues for the stories in the classroom, or maybe storytelling to encourage in pair or group interactions. The student will be happy and they are at home for the stories they have read. And then develop grammar and vocabulary skills at correct tenses, like stories or fictions, novels or stories, or maybe poems. Yeah, they have certain tenses, especially for past tense, and then word order, individual and related words or text, or maybe, I'm sorry, or lexes, so the words here. And the other one that is for reading habit. For reading habit, when they read a lot, it will raise continuity for reading. So they have their own habit. They will read and then raise enjoyment. They like it, enjoy it, and then they are fresh. They are thinking positively about the stories, and their life will be quite good and better and better. And raise reading quantity. Yeah, with the reading habit, with the program for the teacher or classroom, the quantity, the number of readings, stories especially, are carried. See, that is increase, I mean, and consistency. Here is still a problem in our situation because the students, the teachers assign them with reading, and then usually they are difficult to read, very hard for them to read because of the habit, low habit, or maybe we have no community in reading. Reading community is good to establish, I think. Okay. In extensive reading, why yes? Why yes? We agree, extensive reading. The reason for extensive reading, one objective of extensive reading is reading for pleasure, enjoyment. So first thing to do, first thing to have, that is, they will be quite emotional, happy, I mean, here, and glad, and it is good to have and to go on with their learning. This builds confidence. With pleasure, building confidence, motivation, which makes the learner a more effective user of language. Excessive reading builds vocabulary. That's I taught it before. When learners read a lot, they meet thousands of words and lexical word patterns that are not taught in textbooks. Excessive reading allows the learner to develop awareness of collocation, it is common word partnerships, and thousands of lexical phrases. And extensive reading helps learners understand grammar. Extensive reading provides opportunities to see grammar in context, to learn, so learners can deepen their understanding of how grammar is really used. In textbook, learners meet hundreds of grammar patterns, and however, textbooks do not provide enough meetings with grammar for real acquisition to occur. Excessive reading helps learners to build reading speed and reading fluency. In particular, developing reading speed is important because it helps learners to understand a language faster and better. This is a special I took from Extensive Reading Central. Okay, besides why yes, I also try to have this idea, why no? I mean, this is quite a problem, excessive reading. It is considered as supplementary, but assume secondary or misconception to intensive reading. In learning English at schools or maybe in the university, yeah, most students have their reading classes. Yeah, we'll go to intensive reading, that is to comprehend text. Yeah, that is what I mean here. Can be offered generalization in school curriculum setting because in the curriculum, it is not explicitly stated about extensive reading. Yeah, I think it is a good way to think about. We can propose and we can specify about extensive reading. Yeah, at schools, we can also come to school and ask the teachers, ask the management about allocating the time, or maybe inserting the materials for extensive reading, and not only for intensive reading. Mismanagement roles of teachers in classroom interaction. Yeah, that's what I agree with Dr. Renandia about the roles of teachers. Teachers' roles should be reducing, giving roles just to help, that is to monitor or maybe to give support, motivation to students. But the students will be active. The students will be more engaging with the reading, not the teachers. Yeah, the teachers' talk should be reducing, I think, and then give the time to students to learn. Should be student-centered. Almost zero reading habit or custom to establish for study skills management. It is in our situation, especially we find out that yeah, there is no specific or special reading habit or custom to establish. Incorrect learning strategies is starting to learn specific readers. Yeah, I read the book by Kirchner and Mandel talking about active student in reading stories using 3 strategies. Number 1, that is previewing. Number 2, that is highlighting. And number 3 is annotating. Okay, now I come to this. Sorry. Where is it? Yeah, science. I talk about the sign then. Sign role in reading text, especially for stories. How things signify. Theory say that a sign represents a meaningful unit, interpreted as standing for something. It may represent the object or other than itself. Yeah, that is Chandra especially talk about it. And then purse. Yeah, what is there? Physical form of narrative text. The sign is in the words. Can be sounds, can be images, can be pictures, tables, whatever. Yeah, and then acts. And these relate to extensive reading situation. So reading. And then modes of icons, index and symbol. Icon, that is similarities or maybe imitation or copy of, let's say, the characters, main characters, or maybe characters of protagonists and characters of antagonists with their conflicts in the stories. So that is icon. Icon talks about similarities in the pictures especially. And then index. Index in design, that is the modes, dealing with possibilities. That is dealing with impression. So when the students read stories, they have their own impression about the stories, about the characters, about the setting, and then about the theme. Yeah, that is in the elements of the stories. And then symbol. Yeah, symbol, yeah, talking about the characters again, or maybe the theme of the stories. Yeah, dealing with what we mean by conventional characters. That is the life, the time, and the place where the stories happened. And this refers to that is conventional, or maybe that is about the rules, or maybe about the customs in the character's life or place. And then meaning and values. Let's say the meaning here. I'm talking about the meaning of, let's say, the stories in words or maybe in pictures, whatever, in images. And I try to, yeah, propose, especially based on this triangle, Persian triangle. Yeah, Persian triangle in the theory that talks about the triangle here. When we talk about design in A, it is also called representation. That is the sign taken. And then the object, let's say I have a word. See, it talks about design, and then I talk about the meaning up there on top, B, that is interpreted, the interpretation, the sense made, sign meaning interpreted. And then going down into the referent, that is the object. And this is the way maybe the students understand the stories, dealing with the words, dealing with the characters, the names, whatever. And then they try to understand it, to have the meaning, and then they imagine. They come into what it is, the object. See? Okay. Yeah, let me a little bit talk about this. Yeah, in narrative text especially, I'm trying to look at this narrative, especially poetry. I mean, here is narrative poetry, like epic, long poems, and then in prose or fiction. When we talk about the elements, 2 of all the 6 or 7 elements in the stories, that is characters. As said before, that is characters concerns with the mode of science. It is called iconic. That is the meaning, imitation, copy. And then it happens in words. It happens in sounds. That is the science unit. And then in lexical, yeah, in words or sounds, whatever here, or images, we talk about what is the impression, the possibility that I can have. And then symbolic, that is about convention. Convention, that is what happens, how people live in one place, in certain time, for example. And then the values, standards of behavior or attitude, we can get. The students get, example, when reading stories, they have the values or maybe moral values about truth, about justice, about honesty, and so on here and so on, right? So the students will be proud of. They are quite happy and enjoy, of course, and convinced, see, about themselves. So what we call here, that is, they have their own self-confidence, more and better self-confidence through reading stories because they know the values. And the last one, certain recommendation maybe here, motivating strategies. Excessive reading should be part of intentional reading study skills. Yeah, we can have this and do maybe a research, whatever, for that, see, to find out whether it is intentional reading study skills. I mean, that how the students read in the classroom, especially out of the classroom, at home or wherever, see. Extensive reading needs more room to its teaching and learning process. I think not all schools or maybe universities pay attention very much to this. So I suggest, I recommend they have this. Extensive reading is complementary to intensive reading. Extensive reading needs to be associated with the study and analysis of science, meaning, and values, as I said before. Narrative reading should be the medium of reading for appreciation. So it is a kind of reading for appreciation. The students appreciate, yeah, their stories in there about the characters, about the theme, about the setting, whatever. And there should be appropriate strategies to become active learners in reading extensively. Well, that is all. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Renandia. Thank you, Ibu Esther Anita. Thank you, audience. Terima kasih banyak semua. Adil Kak Talino, Bacuramin Kak Saruga, Basengat Kak Jubata.
Harus. Thank you so much, Pak Albert, for your presentation. It's been very beneficial for us. Before we jumping in to the next session, we would like to apologize for the inconvenience caused by the internet connectivity and also the technical issues. We, on the behalf of the committee, we would like to say sorry for that. But before we go to the general takeaways from all the presenters, there's like one question addressed to Pa Albert Rufinus. Pa Albert, there's this one question. According to your, excuse me, Pa Albert, are you with us? There's this one question. How do the teachers help the students to enjoy reading in the classroom, considering that they have different narrative texts, like containing many different values, different intakes? How do the teachers, according to your opinion and experience, help the students to enjoy reading in the classrooms? Excuse me, Albert, can you hear us? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Albert. It seems that it's muted. So, okay. Okay.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Pak Gunto. Well, narrative or maybe reading stories, right? Yeah, thank you. Can you repeat, Pak Gunto?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So,
thank you, Pak Gunto.
how do the teachers help the students enjoy
Narrative
reading in the classroom, according to your
maybe
opinion
reading
or
stories,
experience?
right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Can you repeat, Pak Gunto?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Pak Gunto.
How do the teachers help?
Yeah, Pak Gunto, I will try to answer that, right? That is about narrative or stories. In our context, especially in West Kalimantan or in Ngabang, we are having certain program that is to encourage the students to read more local stories. Most of them are still oral, yeah, oral stories, cerita-cerita lisan, yeah. And of course, they have the values for that. When they read, they will get the meaning, they will get how the characters, events, that is cultural relationship events, and how the conflicts goes up and then go down into the finishing or ending stories. So values quite much, you see, that the students can find. But this again needs the teacher's model. The teachers will give first model to the students what the meaning of values here. Nilai-nilai tradisi, see? So traditional values like what I said just now, that is truth or maybe cooperation, care, love. They can find it in the stories and through the signs with the words, with the images, pictures, or maybe how the teachers and the students can dramatize stories into live dramatization, right? They have their own, let's say, drama in the classroom, maybe out of the classroom. They have the festival for that. Yeah, that is what we are planning to have in Kalimantan Barat, in Ngabang. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Albert, for your insights. So I would like to address one last general takeaways from all the speakers of today's webinars. It's been such a really, really interesting topic to cover, and we think that 2 hours wouldn't be enough to cover everything. But unfortunately, we have such a limited amount of time. So one last general takeaway from all the speakers: why should we need to do more extensive reading activities in our teaching and learning? Why extensive reading is very important for our teaching and learning? Starting from Pak Willy, would you mind,
Yes.
sir?
Okay. if our main goal of teaching English is to help our students to be able to speak, to read, to listen, and to write, then extensive reading is the way to go. Now, in addition to extensive reading, you can also implement extensive listening or extensive viewing. What is the theory behind this? I remember one statement, very good, and this statement comes from years and years of research into second language acquisition. It says, our ability to use language draws heavily on our implicit knowledge of the language. Let me repeat that again. Our ability to use, to speak, to read, to write, to listen, it comes from our language knowledge in our head, but this knowledge is implicit, bukan yang explicit knowledge. Now, explicit knowledge means knowledge of the language, knowledge about grammar rules, knowledge about the present tense, knowledge about the past tense. These are explicit knowledge that we teach in the classroom. But that does not contribute very much on our ability to speak, to read, to write, and so on. Now, so how do we develop this implicit linguistic knowledge? One way of doing it, through reading, through listening. There's no other way. Students need to listen again and again. Students need to read again and again. And after a period of time, 1 year at least, the students will accumulate, will develop this implicit knowledge of the language, which will then enable them to speak and to write and to read and to listen in the language. That, to me, is extremely important for us to remember. But if your goal of teaching is to help your students pass the examination, then there's no need for you to change. Just continue doing whatever you have been doing. Teach them in the way that you have always been doing with your students. Teach them a lot of grammar, teach them a lot of vocabulary, and so on and so forth. The students will be very good at passing examinations, but after the exam, can they speak the language? A little, not much. But basically, they will not be able to speak the language fluently. So that will be my take, looking at the relationship between extensive reading and listening and the theory of language learning, the theory of language acquisition.
Thank you so much, Pak Willa. I got a goosebump listening to that. Next up, Bu Anita, would you mind sharing your last takeaway? Why should we need to do more ER activities in our teaching and learning?
Okay, to me, everything starts from reading. If we want, well, in the classroom, teacher has very limited ability. Teacher cannot always introduce anything to the students. So the students have to read by themselves. If they can read, if they enjoy reading, they can explore many things in their own way. So how to do that, how to introduce or how to build reading interest is through extensive reading, because extensive reading is really fun to do. So students just read everything that they like, and hopefully starting from that point, they can read and read and read more and more. Thank you.
Fun and engagement.
Yes. Hello.
Hello, yeah, so sorry. Fun and engagement. Thank you so much. That's a really, really great takeaway. Thank you so much. I'm really inspired to hear that. Last but not least, Pak Albert, would you mind sharing your last takeaway, why ER? Pak Albert? You're muted now, sir.
Okay, thank you, Pak Kun. Yeah, I think there should be an establishment or building of awareness of the teachers, both teachers and students, about reading extensively, because this is not becoming our habit or maybe customs. I propose there should be a community or maybe association about reading extensively. We will share, because in some places, and we admit that in our case, there are still poor reading habit for this. The teacher will give the model, and then contact should be increasing, right, between the teachers and then the experts in reading especially. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you so much, Pak Albert. Yes, we need to be a model for our students, because we cannot really expect our students to be a good reader if we don't even read, right? So again, thank you so much for all the speakers, Pak Willy, Bu Anita, Pak Albert. It's been such a tremendous honor for me to moderate this webinar with you and share your expertise. For all the participants, thank you so much for your enthusiasms. Before we close down this webinar, I would like to announce some couple things. Jadi untuk kami sampaikan, untuk webinar ini, e-sertifikat akan didapatkan oleh peserta setelah mengisi angket kepuasan webinar. Jadi akan kami post the link untuk angket kepuasan, sehingga nanti mohon diperhatikan dengan sungguh-sungguh agar Bapak Ibu menuliskan alamat email yang benar di angket tersebut, sehingga sertifikat dapat kami proses dan kirim kepada Bapak Ibu dengan baik. Yang kedua, kami masih sangat-sangat baru di Sekolah Tinggi Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan Paman Talon di Kalimantan Barat, dan sekarang kami sedang menerbitkan jurnal bernama Journal of English Education by STKIP Paman Talino di program studi pendidikan bahasa Inggrisnya. Kami mohon bimbingannya, dan bagi Bapak Ibu yang sekiranya tertarik untuk mengumpulkan artikel, bisa kontak kami, nanti akan kami berikan link juga. Karena ini masih dalam taraf pengembangan, kami mohon dibimbing. Again, thank you so much. We are sorry for any technicality issues and networking problem, but regardless, it's been such a really, really rewarding moment for us to be able to come in this webinar with Pak Willy, Bu Anita, and Pak Albert, who shared their expertise. We give a big round of applause for the experts, Pak Willy, Bu Anita, and Pak Albert. Salah penutup dari before we close, we would like to ask for your 15 seconds to take pictures together, if that's okay. Untuk dokumentasi, silahkan, kami tunggu host. Alright. So 1, 2, 3. Good. Thank you so much again and again. We would like to address for everyone, Pak Willy, Bu Anita, and Pak Albert. Sekian dari kami, English Language Education Study Program of STKIP Paman Talino. Sampai jumpa di kesempatan berikutnya. With this, Kunto Nur Sayaka as your moderator, signing off. Thank you so much. See you, everyone. Oh ya, untuk Bapak Ibu, nanti kami akan unggah video ini, jadi nanti kami akan sharekan di WhatsApp group juga untuk linknya. Jadi terima kasih atas partisipasi, dan untuk pengumuman-pengumuman yang lain silahkan menghubungi panitia yang ada di grup chat maupun link yang tersedia di poster kemarin. Terima kasih sekali lagi.